Brought to you by Sip for Your Cause.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Nonprofits, a show where we discuss those best practices that help increase awareness, funding, sustainability, and ultimately impact for nonprofit organizations. And we do that through dialogue with various experts in the industry. And today we're we're excited to have none other than Miss Wheelchair USA, Mrs. Yvette Pegues. And before we get to the point where you are able to learn about her and her great organization she represents, I would like to pause and just thank our sponsors, our show sponsor in particular, sipforyourcause.org. Again, you can reach them at www.sipforyourcause.org, and again, help them as they help nonprofits realize their missions and their goals. So, we are excited to be here with Mrs. Yvette Pegues. Again, she is the national title holder for Miss Wheelchair USA. And before we just dive into all the things about what she's doing, I would just like for you, Yvette, to just share with them who is the person Yvette Pegues.
That's a loaded question.
Okay.
But I'm happy to start with my humble beginnings in Miami, Florida.
Yes.
So I was actually born in South Florida, the youngest of only 2 children.
Okay.
And my older brother was a lot older than me, so I grew up wanting to be exactly like him.
Okay.
I played a lot of sports, and I loved education. I really did. For some reason, that was the thing that really connected to me at a very early age. So outside of being very physically active, I ran track, played basketball, rode horses. So anything that I could get, involved in, I did. I even worked on my dad's car with him. So it was just an amazing childhood growing up in South Florida.
So were you one of those tomboys?
That would be the exact word that I use on any other occasion.
Okay.
But yes, I was absolutely a tomboy.
Okay.
So I love this second childhood where I get to wear pink and a crown. So yes, that was me.
The reason I say that, my sister is the only girl out of 6 children.
Oh my gosh.
And so all of the descriptors I'm hearing, I'm like, oh, that's my sister.
Oh yes.
And she was definitely a tomboy. Well, we are glad to hear about your upbringing and the engagement and your activities that you're involved in. That leads us into this question.
Okay.
Share with us. Everybody's looking at this show right now. Initially, when it aired, when the show, they saw the wheelchair.
That's right.
They saw a beautiful young lady in a wheelchair. And I would go a little further. And they probably took on the attitude of being saddened. Say, oh, beautiful young lady in a wheelchair. And I would think you would. And I would tell you that probably would have been my attitude if my conversation with you a few weeks back hadn't taken place. You don't know the impact you've had on me, okay? And but share with everyone pre-injury.
Absolutely. So living in South Florida was amazing. I was able to attend a very small university by the name of Berry University. That's Berry with an A in South Florida. But that was only after receiving at least half a dozen scholarships because I graduated at 16.
Wow.
And because my mother was a single mother, she chose for me to work instead of taking advantage of the academic scholarships that I received. In retrospect, I was much younger than most of the children who were graduating, so I appreciate what she did, but why she did it was really hard for me to take. With that said, I ended up having to work full-time and earn my merit scholarships almost 2 years later. So I had 2 or 3 jobs, and I was going to about 2 or 3 schools. And one of my jobs was a networking support person at Florida Power and Light, which gave me the opportunity to work 3rd shifts. So I worked Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night when all of my peers were out partying. I was working the 3rd shift, but I was also getting a lot of homework done, and I had the rest of the week to go to school.
Wow.
Yep.
That is amazing. I tell you, I would like to just peek inside the mind of your mother back then to just, who would tell their child to not accept the scholarship, but you're going to, in essence, develop these characteristics that will impact you later on in life. That's my assumption. That's what I'm hearing. But that's another show.
Right.
But so that's pre-life, before the wheelchair. But what were you doing professionally after you graduated from college?
I was very excited to be contacted by International Business Machines. That's IBM. It was the Apple of our day.
Yes.
Very huge and amazing, diversified company. They're 100 years old this year, and they actually recruited me from Barry University, which was, bigger than I expected. I did think at some point I would become an attorney, but with a networking and systems engineering degree, which is pretty much the cloud of today,
Yes.
they recruited me just knowing that what I did and what I was getting my degree in and what I was showing expertise in would, in a very short period of time, be a very big business.
Wow.
So I was recruited there, and because there were so many Top Guns here in Atlanta, I found myself traveling back and forth until IBM, which sometimes stands for I've Been Moved, moved me here to Atlanta, where I started my career and also met my husband.
Okay, so he worked for IBM.
Yes, we're both techies.
Oh, didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So I was from Miami, he's from Memphis, and we met in Las Vegas at an IBM storage conference.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to get off topic here, but anybody hopeless about finding your mate after hearing this, I think you should relax, okay?
That's right.
But that is amazing.
It is.
And so you began to contribute in your engineering field and profession and to grow. And then what happened? I mean, how did the injury occur?
Very good question. Well, I was with IBM for at least 8 to 9 years. And during that time, I had my first child, Isaiah. And at that time, because of my childhood and some of the challenges, I had so many questions, and I really didn't have a childhood I wanted to model.
Okay.
So I asked a lot of questions, being left brain, logical, and scientific. I figured I could read a book and figure out how to raise a child.
Okay.
Well, I realize now as a parent that there was so much more. But Kennesaw State University became very interested in my desire to learn more about children. So I got a second degree in early childhood education with a certification in Montessori. So that leads me to the call I received from Harvard University, offering me a doctorate program fully funded by Bill Gates' organization and a few other really rich people.
Yeah.
So even though I was at an executive level at IBM, I was a worldwide project and program delivery manager for Asia and Canada. And I'd really been a corporate climber, because that's just kind of what I did in sports and what I did with anything I got my hands on. And just about 6 weeks prior to relocating once again and starting our second life, I had this amazing pain on the right side of my body, which rendered me completely numb and unable to function. I had forceful pain in my head, and I was really concerned because I had recently returned from Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. So we weren't sure what was going on, but when I got to the emergency room, they first diagnosed me with MS, and then they talked about possibly having a stroke, and they canceled some of those things out. And fortunately, by the grace of God, there was a neurologist on staff in the emergency room who ran an MRI, which I thought was really odd at the time. But of course, right after running the MRI, there was a room full of doctors that asked me not to get worried. Right? Don't freak out were their words. So, of course, we freaked out.
Yes. Right.
And they explained to me that I had a genetic condition called Chiari malformation. There's several types, but I had type 1. And what that is actually is at birth, the nerves on the back and bottom of my brain were too long. So they hung a little lower than usual. And the reason why I was having the pain and the injury that evening is because it had fallen into my spinal column and was hemorrhaging. And so the concern that the emergency room physicians had was that it would react like a dam or being locked in a room and break through the back of my skull.
All right. So, going from being what anybody would naturally dream of as the American dream, I mean, finishing college, working your way through college, getting picked up by a top 10 corporation,
Correct.
IBM, executive level, traveling the world on behalf of this company,
Correct.
having a family. I mean, anybody would dream of an ideal world that Yvette has just described. And then one day, you encounter this injury. First of all, I can only imagine how you must have taken, but what impact did it have initially on your family?
Well, surprisingly, my husband, being the amazing man that he is, he may walk into a room unnoticed, but he's actually 10 foot tall. And early on in our marriage, when I hear people say what you mentioned earlier, oh, poor little girl in a wheelchair, I try to communicate to them that my real disability happened in the first 2 years of my marriage because I did not respect and honor my husband. And once we got through those first 2 years, I realized that the emasculation was gone and that his leadership was more evident and present, and I submitted to his strength and my position according to God's word. And the great thing about that is once the injury happened, it was like catching a cold. Wow. He was already the lead. He already held the sword. Wow. And there was really no difference. And I really do appreciate that, because I really do believe that had I still been wearing the pants in my mind and virtually running the home as I believe it should have been run, but not hearing God's word that he speaks specifically to a man in a husband and wife relationship, I would have been worried about my family. But we grew stronger.
Wow. I tell you, that's a great testimony that, what may appear to be a tragedy turns up into be a triumph for a family, and not just a family from that perspective, but, once you begin to hear the amazing things that Yvette is doing on behalf of Miss Wheelchair USA, but we will on another show and episode address the amazing things that she's doing in another capacity on behalf of the disabled community. But today this show is focusing on her leadership role and representation of Miss Wheelchair USA. So before we go to commercial break, let's talk about that. Just introduce us. What is Miss Wheelchair USA?
Miss Wheelchair USA is an organization sponsored by the Dane Foundation. The Dane Foundation is located in Ohio. It's actually Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Yes. And what they do is they supply the needs of families who have children with disabilities. Wow. Any member of the family with a disability, regardless of your income, receive the basic needs that aren't usually covered in some of the costs that you might get on a state and governmental level. And they, 17 years ago, saw women with wheelchairs doing great things. So the Miss Wheelchair organization does have glamour, as you can see, but it's based on community service.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I am so excited that we have Miss Wheelchair USA 2014. 14-15 here with us today on Let's Talk Nonprofits. So again, that you can bring attention to the fact that Miss Wheelchair USA organization exists, and then talk about how you can assist in terms of helping the organization achieve those objectives, some of which you just heard Miss Yvette Pegues share with you. So what we're going to do before we dive into that, we're going to go to a commercial break, and we'll be back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Miss Wheelchair USA. Those of you who are out there listening and you might be a disabled person, stay tuned, particularly if you're female, and we want to get into how you could possibly get involved and become a contestant in the Miss USA contest, Miss Wheelchair USA contest. Thank you. And so before we go, again, we would like to thank our sponsors, our show sponsor, sipforyourcause.org. Again, you can reach them at www.sipforyourcause.org and check them out on the social media aspects. Support them, because they're doing tremendous work to support nonprofit organizations and all of those capacities of organization development, funding, sustainability, growth, and ultimately impact. So we will see you after this commercial break.
What happens when soldiers come home? Brene Foundation offers hero support to ensure that our heroes abroad can continue to be heroes at home. We link veterans with organizations who are dedicated to guiding the transition from military hero to civilian hero. If you want to find out how you can support our troops at home, please contact the Brene Foundation or visit Brene.com.
Does your son need a more challenging, focused, and encouraging educational environment? Renaissance Christian Academy is an affordable private school for boys located in McDonough, Georgia, with certified teachers that are uniquely equipped to help your son master learning. You're welcome to schedule a tour of our facilities by calling 770-305-9881 or by visiting our website at rcaboysacademy.org. Renaissance Christian Academy, developing young men to be great leaders through Christ-centered learning.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Nonprofits, and again, we thank our sponsors. Please, please, please reach out, support our sponsors and advertisers. They keep us on air. So, we would like to continue. We begin our conversation about Miss Wheelchair USA, what it is, and let's go into that discussion a little deeper. First of all, we want to acknowledge that Mrs. Yvette Pegues is the first Georgia Miss Wheelchair to go on and attain the national title. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about how others can get involved.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about that and had no idea, but there's a couple things that I'm really excited about. First of all, actually being Miss Wheelchair Georgia first at the state level and winning the national crown as the first African American woman of color to even wear the national crown. So there's a double whammy there. Yes. So the first woman of color to wear the national crown and the first woman or contestant from the state of Georgia.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you.
It's my pleasure, and ironically, there's a lot of firsts in my life. I'm also first generation high school and college.
Wow.
Yes.
So she's no stranger to first. And believe me, and there's some things I can't disclose that we've talked about. She's going to be the first on many levels on some things that are coming up. So follow her, please. And let's stop right here. First of all, how can they get in contact with the Miss Wheelchair USA organization, but also Ms. Yvette Pegues? How and can they follow you?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the Miss Wheelchair organization can very easily be found online, mswheelchairusa.org. That's also the Facebook page. But to get in touch with me directly, it's Mrs. MRS Ability.
Right.
At YvettePegues.com. And the reason why I'm giving you my personal information is because if you choose or would like to even explore being a candidate for the Miss Wheelchair organization, feel free to contact me. I'll help you through the application process and we can talk about whatever questions that you have. And if you're an organization that would like to sponsor us, you're more than welcome to contact me as well. We're fortunate to have a few sponsors that support us now, but we can never have enough.
Well, I tell you, we definitely thank you. And again, every organization that we bring on this show, I tell you, we have our fullest confidence in that you will not go off track with supporting them in every way that you're able. So please, again, go out there, reach them in the ways in which Yvette has identified, and please contribute in every way, whether it's your talent, skills, finances, other resources, networking to bring other resources to those organizations so that they can continue to achieve their goals. Please reach out to them. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for allowing me to.
I want to go to your platform.
Sure.
So tell us about your platform as Miss Wheelchair USA.
Absolutely. So a platform in a contestant-based, pageant-based contest would require that you find something within yourself that you feel strongly about and won't get tired of talking about for the next 12 months or 12 years.
Okay.
So I had to dig really deep because I had so many irons in the fire when I was contacted by Miss Wheelchair USA. But as I mentioned to you, being the first generation high school and college, I really didn't know until junior high school that neither one of my parents could read or write.
Wow.
So once I realized that I had to teach myself to read by watching TV and having an open
Yeah.
dictionary, I had this compassion for education, especially coming over from the engineering side. And the two sides of the brain don't usually work well together. So as a very cognizant and cognition-based scientific thinker,
Yes.
now having to be an educator really gave me a whole outlook on what education looked like. And through my injury, I was able to teach my children what was happening, allowed them into the room at the hospital, sitting in my wheelchair, touching my stitches. And it was an educating process. And I really do believe that education saved my life, because had I not gone back to get my second degree, my right brain would not have been as strong as it was prior to the injury. So with all that said, my platform is a legacy of literature.
Yes.
And the reason why that's important to me is because at the age of 5 and 7, both of my boys got the opportunity to not just write, but publish their own book.
I tell you. And that's what I say. There, once you get to know Yvette and you talk to Yvette, and I'm sure this happened already, I promise you. And if I was a betting man, I would bet you and ask you to respond through whether it's whether you're looking at this at YouTube or whatever, commenting. But I would bet you that wheelchair has faded. I promise you, you don't even see it. And those of you who are listening, please comment back. Let me know how right I am. And for the very few of you who may, which I doubt, I want you to comment as well. I would be surprised to just see, because she makes you, it's something about her that I can't even find words to describe it, but you no longer see a person in a wheelchair. You see a person that has such intellectual and more than intellectual capacity. You find somebody with such passion that she just engulfs you, and therefore you no longer see what others may deem as a disability. And talking to her over the phone a few weeks back, I was just so motivated, and even meeting her the first time prior to then, that she does something to you. She causes you to look at life differently. She causes you to look at those who are characterized by disability differently. And so, I'm right now, I struggle to go back and say, oh, disabled or disability. Just like she just said. She says Miss Ability, Mrs. Ability.
Mrs. Ability is my email address,
Yeah.
but my tagline is people with different abilities.
Yes.
And there's a quote that I really do love, and it says, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And think about someone with a disability, whether it's visible, like my wheelchair, or invisible, you have to do the same thing. You have to get to the same end with completely different means. So in my opinion, I believe people who struggle, whether it's a disability, and it could be caused by an accident or an injury, aging, you just really never know if your life is going to change. But if you're in a position where there's something holding you back, recognize the genius in that. Recognize the innovation, and having to get to the same point B as everyone else.
Yes.
Maybe slower, but definitely differently.
Yes.
So differently abled is really something that I think better demonstrates who we are in this community. And the community is getting younger. You have younger children in wheelchairs now. Brain injury is so much more common. And as I mentioned, the disability population has become its own race, if you will.
Yes.
And if you think of it as a minority, as you should, what you'll recognize is that each and every person, each and every American, man, woman, and it really doesn't depend on your color or anything else, you can, like myself, be standing one day and sitting the next. And how do you adapt? How do you adjust? How do you now raise your children with a disability? Well, you do it differently.
I am not one of those who is a prognosticator, or even one who goes back and plays Monday morning quarterback. But I would definitely tell you that I think about your two sons at the ages of 5 and 7 authoring a book.
Yes.
I would just guess now the probability of that happening without you experiencing the injury, but not just experiencing the injury, but then finding that internal strength that is, which you would readily say the Spirit of God enabled you with. But those things that have become beautiful. In fact, you used some term we talked earlier, and I forget what it was, but you described life differently. It's like it's like a second life, or I forget the exact term, but it made me imagine, as one who's not going through any type of physical disability or that has caused me to develop a different strategy of achieving same goals. But you begin to cause me to look at myself and assess differently about how I go about achieving goals, or achieving goals in spite of setbacks, what may appear to be setbacks.
Exactly.
So I you guys who follow us, you know, I get a little caught up sometimes when I have great, passionate guests and topics of conversation. Let's move a little further.
Sure.
So we have literacy for legacy.
It's a legacy of literature. And the reason why I called it that is because, much like my children,
Yes.
who one day will be applying to college, on their application they get to say, I authored a book.
Yes.
And our books, our works, live far beyond us. And I'm trying to teach my children and children with disabilities that you can be seen through the pages of the book and not judged by your appearance or your limitations. And the great thing about the legacy is that you have children from 5 to 15, 4 to 14, but all the way up until adulthood, now turning their storms into stories.
Yeah, and tell us a little more about that, because from what I think in some of my research, your platform is driving people to reach out to author. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So would you share, I mean, how can they become part of literature for legacy of literature?
Yes, my platform and Miss Wheelchair has allowed me the latitude to do whatever I have the most passion about.
Yeah.
And because it's education, I'm allowing all children, and this is all inclusive, so you don't necessarily have to have a disability, but you can hashtag Legacy of Literature, or you can go to my organization called Your Invisible disability.com, which is an organization that I created immediately after my injury, because I don't just have a physical injury, I also have massive left brain damage. So I believe that I could go back to work at IBM, but because of the left brain cognition and mathematical loss that I had, I couldn't go back to school. I mean, I couldn't go back to work, and I was afraid to go back to school because my IQ dropped. But what I'm understanding now is that my EQ was raised.
And tell them what the EQ is.
Your EQ is your emotional quotient, or your emotional intelligence. And what it is really how you fake it until you make it. It's how you socially communicate and connect with people. Because to be perfectly honest, I am medically not supposed to be speaking right now. I am not supposed to be able to formulate words. But I am able to now recognize my triggers and switch my conversation to the right brain instead of to the left brain, where my cognition and kind of skips on a beat, like maybe a computer or a record might skip. That's what happens when I try to be a little too technical. So even though I've written patents for IBM, I've written technical books, I recognize what's most important is my new normal. And I'm ready to move forward with that and to bring people along with me. So if you have a child who has a storm and wants to turn it into a story, feel free to contact me at www.legacyofliterature.com.
So listen, and that's what I want to make sure that you understood, how you can participate in this initiative, this legacy building that is taking place. In fact, there's a legacy of literacy tour that's taking place. And so please reach out to Yvette Pegues so that your children can participate. Again, I'm glad and I wasn't aware, but I'm glad she brought to our attention that they do not have to have any physical or mental disability. Please. So regardless of the physical ability of your child, mental ability of your child, have them to reach out or help them reach out and get involved with this great initiative. And
there's sponsorship also and support opportunities. So if you're a teacher, retired, or active, and you'd like your entire school to write a book together, your class or sibling groups, it's really wide open. So you can sponsor it to make sure that these children have materials to move forward and to be successful. And also as an educator or an author or an editor, you can definitely donate your talents to this project. But we're looking at 1 million children publishing books and creating a legacy. And what I recognize with my children is once they wrote the book, obviously there was an education there, but they were getting bullied at school because I showed up with my neck brace, my wheelchair, and all my disability paraphernalia, and it was very uncomfortable for the other students because my children were fine until it was brought to their attention that mommy was different.
Right.
So the book gave them confidence. They were able to break through any type of bullying, and they got stronger and a lot more passionate about education. So it will change your child. It will change your experience working with children.
We have to talk, Yvette. While you were talking, some things came to my mind
Sure.
where we can definitely help in that regard, okay?
Thank you.
Accessing those children and schools, and I'm seeing school districts.
Absolutely.
So looking forward to that. We it's great conversation, as you can see, guys. And so we're going to really tell you to stay in touch with Yvette Pegues. Follow her because some great, exciting things are developing that you want to be a part of, you want to see. But we're going to move on because there's some things I do want to make sure we discuss today. And one, let's talk about ADA. I mean, we cannot talk about disability and not talk about ADA and the disability community. So how has ADA helped you and the disabled community?
ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities. It's an act that started exactly 25 years ago this year. So this year's kind of a big deal. But one thing that I recognize as someone with a disability is that although I saw those blue and white signs with wheels and someone looking happy, our city, our country is not as accessible as we think it is. So I was told once that I needed to be the Martin Luther King, the face of disability. And to be perfectly honest with you, when I originally got a wheelchair, it wasn't this wheelchair, I was completely embarrassed. I was afraid. I felt like I was imprisoned. But this is now part of my body. And I recognize that if I am going to affect change, if I want to change the way people look at disability, I needed to create an image that looked like my life. And that's when I started Your Invisible Disability. The ADA, although amazing, really gets enforced through litigation. So there's no enforcement of ADA. This is not to say that it's not an amazing opportunity for people with disabilities, but what we do need to recognize is that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So I've had the opportunity to work with the U.S. Department of Education. I'm on their website, kicking off the ADA 25 years back in January, and I'm actively working with organizations and businesses to make sure that their structures are accessible. And of course, if you're not sitting at 4 feet tall, you may not recognize the things that are out of whack. So I had the opportunity to become very well educated, not just in the law, the actual the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And I think that's what's really missing. Have you ever been to a restaurant or a business that had "We welcome people with disabilities" or the ADA sign kind of in the lower right-hand window? So we need to make sure that our workplace and our businesses accept and is accepting of people with disabilities, not just as consumers, but as employees. Because people with disabilities, I promise you, are so dedicated and can affect change and can affect the economy in a huge way. And so given the opportunity and given the chance and removing the mask and perception of people with disabilities, I think partnering with that through the ADA, the organization, and the enforcement of the rules, not meant to exclude, but to include and create an inclusive America.
I appreciate you taking that time to get into that conversation. And please, again, connect with Mrs. Yvette Pegues. You will find that she will continue that conversation along in some amazing ways. So please follow her on all of her social media handles, and again, her websites. The other thing we want to talk about, because there's some things I definitely want to make sure we discuss before we leave. But you have authored the book, and please tell us about the book and about your bookings.
Absolutely. So my new masterpiece, I'm so excited about it, is called The Art of Adaptability, because I promise you, we spent the first year and a half just taking calls and going to the mailbox, and we literally went from making seven figures to owing seven figures, because the management of a disability is just as expensive over time as the actual brain surgery that I had. So it took us a while to connect, and I found myself going to doctor's appointments and literally crying and losing it and having to be talked off of a ledge. But what I learned to do over time was stop, breathe, pray, then write. And over time, all of that writing turned into a workbook. And in the workbook, I have a process called the 4 4s for newly disabled and diagnosed persons. And everyone who treats and supports them. It's important, especially because the first 3 to 6 to 9 months of your disability are imperative. And if you miss those windows, there's a lot that you will also miss out on. So it's also important to practitioners, because bedside manner doesn't really include tragedy and those type of situations. So this workbook is not just for people with disabilities, but their families, their caretakers, their practitioners. Because again, we need to be educated on all of the disabilities and minorities. We have military personnel coming in with invisible disabilities, and depression is huge, not just within disability, but also outside of the community of disability. There's a lot of stress and pain out there, people. And we hear you. We understand that there's a lot going on with you. And you may be struggling with something we can't see. But recognize that not only my book, but the Miss Wheelchair organization and organizations such as yourself and sponsors are here to help you, but you have to report. The biggest problem in the disability community is shame and guilt. And in education, the reporting. So the structures sometimes are there, but we do not take advantage of them because of shame, pain, guilt, or just not being educated. No one teaches us how to be disabled. We just go from one stage to the other, or we're born that way.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. I would like to ask that you share how they can get your book.
Absolutely. You can go to YvettePegues.com or yourinvisibledisability.com. I also am providing booking opportunities and large group opportunities. I am talking to schools right now. I'm also talking to medical institutions. And let's not forget athletes. The NFL is definitely on my list, and you're more than welcome to contact me at booking at YvettePegues.com or booking at Your Invisible Disability, and I'll be more than happy to get right back to you. And if you just want to talk, if you just want to communicate where you are and help identifying your invisible disability, I am an adaptability coach and a disability expert, so I can personally support you as well, and I'll be more than happy to do that through my life degree, because I've lived through it, I've been through it, and I can help you through it.
Well, Yvette is gone where I was going to go. She already touched base on, so the only thing left at this point is, what's next, Yvette?
Wow, there's so much left to do. There's a disability treaty that's an international issue. So in order for me to travel outside of the country, I would definitely need help and support. The other thing that's really important to me is definitely making sure that everyone recognizes that you can live forward after a disability. Regardless of the level of disability, life is available to you in the very same ways that it has been for everyone else. And I speak to children from 2 to 102, and the first thing I say is, if you see someone with a disability, reach your hand out and help. Ask what you can do. And if you're as young as 2, just smile. Because sometimes we don't have a scowl on our face because we're angry, but it could be because we're not familiar with our surroundings, our medication is crazy, or we're just ashamed. And shame is such a huge part of disability. So I have the opportunity to start working at the Shepherd Center, where I receive my treatment as a peer support counselor. So once and for all, please reach out. There are hotlines you can call, and obviously if you contact me, your information will remain anonymous. And again, that's Yvette Pegues at Your Invisible Disability, or booking at YvettePegues.com.
Well, thank you. We are so delighted to have spent this time with Mrs. Wheelchair, Miss Wheelchair USA, Mrs. Yvette Pegues. We're thankful that you were able to come and accepted the invitation, and you have contributed to a body of knowledge out there, and that's what we want to do. We want to bring a knowledge base as well as awareness, and you have achieved that today, and so we thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So let me tell you, this is only the beginning of this relationship between BizLinks Consulting Group and BizLinks TV Network and all of the organizations you heard Yvette mentioned. So we're looking forward to doing some great things. Stay tuned. And when I say stay tuned to the connections with Yvette Pegues. Stay tuned with BizLinks TV Network by watching all of our shows, including this Let's Talk Nonprofits at www.bizlinks.tv. Also, you can catch us on our YouTube channel at BizLinks TV. Facebook, it's the same. And again, guys, we thank you for your time. We thank you for following up. Make comments when you, after seeing this this episode, reach out to Yvette, make comments to her via the YouTube channel. We will definitely make sure she gets the information. But again, go directly to her communicative resources and speak directly with her, unite with her cause. So we won't hold you any longer, even though we have so much more I'd like to discuss. But we will see you on our next episode of Let's Talk Nonprofits, where again, we will increase awareness, sustainability, funding, and ultimately impact for nonprofit organizations.